Hello and welcome to Monday Mavericks. My name is Chrissie Hodges. I'm the Executive Director of OCD Gamechangers and the founder. I'm also a certified peer support specialist in the state of Colorado, working with people worldwide, helping them find therapists, as well as providing support as they're working towards recovery with OCD. I'm the co-founder of OCD Peers back here. Check us out, OCDpeers.com. On Monday Mavericks, as you know, we like to feature people that are doing amazing and awesome things in our community. But first, before we get to our guests today, I'm going to talk to you for a brief second about our big event coming up, May 29th, the OCD Gamechangers Retreat. It is virtual. We are structuring it out like it is going to be a campfire retreat, and you're going to feel all cozy and want to roast marshmallows because it is going to be so fun. Early bird tickets have closed. We got a lot of awesome submissions for room titles and groups and ways that we're going to get support. And then at the very end, we're going to do our best to bring everyone together just for a closing. But I also want to say that we are going to be having a Friday night event. Many of you are very curious about Dr. Michael Greenberg's information and clinical forwarding, I don't know how to say that, of how he treats rumination. He would be unable to join us on Saturday, but we got so many requests for Greenberg that we're actually going to have him come on Friday night and do a campfire chat on rumination. And then after that, we might have a surprise event, but I don't want to announce that yet. So go to OCDGamechangers.com, go to the events tab, register. You don't want to miss it. The weekend of May 29th. Woo! We are a 501c3 nonprofit. We run off of donations. Every single penny that you give goes to our initiatives. And our mission is to elevate and support advocacy from people who are doing things to change our community. Speaking of that, we've got two people here today that are doing that very thing. Yay! I'm going to have Lori and Carla introduce themselves and also what they are doing together collaboratively. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah. Y'all go.
I'm excited for the Gamechangers retreat. It's upcoming, and yeah, it's going to be really exciting. Carla, I'm going to let you go first.
All right. My name is Carla D'Agostino. I'm here alongside Lori Johnson, and we are in the Denver area, and we each of us have group practices here that specialize in the treatment of OCD and phobias. So I had the privilege of growing up under Lori, and under her tutelage was where I ended up finding my passion for supporting this population. And so we're in different parts of the city, but together we're coming together, and we've been collaborating on training and support groups and looking to advance the clinician skill set for treatment. And so the brainchild of Modern Therapist Training Collective came about really as an answer to trying to fulfill some of those needs in our community. So I have a small group practice. There are 5 of us, and then we partner very often with Lori and her team.
Yeah. I've been on Mavericks before, as well as being involved with the Gamechangers. I really love this community. So I am Lori Johnson. I have a group practice in focused counseling, and Carla is Ignite Counseling Colorado. We are also a group practice of 8 clinicians specialized in treatment of OCD and addiction. So Carla and I have collaborated together based on like a huge need, not only for ourselves personally from being overwhelmed and inundated with being only a few handful of treatment providers in the Denver area and creating Modern Therapist Training Collective. What we've noticed from these on-demand trainings is that, throughout COVID, we've had a ton of clinicians come to us and say, like, this client has had like generalized anxiety, and now I think this is OCD. Like, what do I do? Somebody gave me your name, and now I want to consult with you and figure things out. But it's kind of like the cart before the horse with a lot of clinicians. And what they didn't realize is that they've been working with OCD this whole time and treating it as anxiety. And with COVID kind of coming in and presenting different symptomology, they've been able to uncover that and kind of redirect. And as many of you know that are listening, and Chrissie, same with you, the treatment duration for someone to get the right treatment, exposure and response prevention, is 10 to 17 years. Such an awful time frame. And our hopes are that in reducing that by training clinicians in the community, and also extenuating training for those who want to become experts in exposure and response prevention, that regardless of where you are on that continuum, that we can either help you triage all the way to completely train you to be serving this population.
So I have a question, and this is what I love about Mavericks, because we don't prepare, so we just get to go off in whatever direction we want.
Yeah.
And here's the direction I'm going to start with. We hear all the time, and, Lori and you and I, and just working in these focus groups, and I shout out on Instagram just to get people's feedback, and I got like 250 comments back of therapists who are saying they treat OCD and they don't. And they're actually doing really horrible things, and people, then don't want to seek treatment because of the things that they hear. So this is a random question, but we will get to being able to uplift what you're doing. But I do want to dive into this a little bit. What is it? Why is it that therapists don't want or don't know evidence-based treatment for OCD? And then this is the second question. Why is it that when they're told what the evidence-based treatment is, they're like, no, that's not it. I've been using X, Y, and Z, and that works for me. So there's two questions there.
This is a huge area of focus that we're really passionate about, because Carla is also doing trauma-based therapy and is trained in EMDR and exposure and response prevention. And we've worked on a lot of cases together. So this is one of the things that we're trying to dispel within the trainings on why EMDR is not a catch-all, and where EMDR is very clinically appropriate alongside ERP.
Yeah.
But you must be trained in both. So Carla, I'll have you speak to that a little bit more on
you bet.
Training and specialty in that.
That's a great two-part question, Chrissie. I love that. So part of what I didn't include in my introduction is similar to Lori in her practice, we work a lot with substance use. So I'm a dually licensed addiction counselor and licensed professional counselor like Lori. And our practice is really centered around that intersection of trauma, OCD, substance use. And so really when we're looking at it from a holistic standpoint. And I know the word holistic gets thrown around a lot. But what I mean from that is, in particular with some of the cases where Lori and I have collaborated, it was a matter of, okay, there is some complex trauma going on here. Some of that may be from that statistic that Lori mentioned, that 10 to 17 years average of getting proper care. It could be something else. It could be, something my practice is seeing a lot is this historic pandemic that is a collective trauma.
Yes.
And so where some folks may have had maybe their OCD was under the radar, so to speak, or manageable, all of a sudden it is off and it's fully present. So helping from a very compassionate standpoint, look at what have you, if you have been to therapy before, what have you been focusing on? And I get a lot of folks coming into the practice who will say, I went down the path and I did EMDR. I don't know. I don't know if that was necessarily helpful. My OCD symptoms are worse than ever. And so that's an indication. What I explain to them is, sure, it's not that you get to have one diagnosis only. That's what you get and that's it. And that's what we're working with. But let's look at the whole picture. and you've tried now, say, EMDR. I'm also trained and now certified by the VA for treatment of PTSD using prolonged exposure therapy, which is the same, it's built from the same grandmother of exposure and response prevention, Dr. Foa. And so there's a lot of intersection there. So it may be that OCD is more forward facing. Let's get you some relief, some healing with ERP. And when your nervous system is really nice and stabilized, then we can get in there and address some of that trauma. Sometimes it goes the other direction. And very often in there, that trifecta of, I cannot stand my symptoms right now. The only thing that shuts it off is alcohol. The only thing that shuts it off is marijuana. So we're talking about all of those things in a really non-judgmental way and helping them understand. Some may step forward, then we're going to work on that. When you're feeling good and strong, we may start addressing some of that older trauma and kind of looking at how maybe substance use patterns change when you're starting to feel more supported and healing. So that has been, with some of the more complex cases where there's layers, where Lori and I have seen that, EMDR can sometimes have a bad rap. It kind of galvanizes the therapist community a bit. But what many don't know is that it's kind of popular in our culture right now. It's like the parlor trick of eye movement, and it's actually a full modality. So when Lori was describing her and I collaborating on a trauma and OCD case, it was Lori providing exposure therapy and response prevention therapy while I was supporting with, say, bilateral stimulation in the form of EMDR paddles. So there's ways to support that nervous system where you're not just doing EMDR trauma reprocessing.
And so why did therapists then resist? Why did they go, Lori, you
I want to talk to that because I think that,
I've been at some of your speeches, by the way, when people are like, I don't believe this. And I'm like in the back going, hey,
I think
OCD suffer here.
You're actually wrong. And I felt that, right? I've been there. I think that sometimes we as therapists can get a little tunnel vision. And I think even sometimes we, as exposure and response prevention therapists, we can get a little tunnel vision. So having my most important thing is, for me and working with my clients or in training other clinicians is transparency. I don't know everything. I don't know every single thing. And if I were to say, well, I know this is the only way, I'm also trained in prolonged exposure, like Carla, and I have different modalities that I work from because flexibility in any kind of therapy is the most important thing to me. If I keep driving home the same point and explaining the same thing over and over again to a client without moving or shifting and changing the way that I'm approaching that, I'm teaching a client to remain rigid in their own life. And that's not helpful for anybody.
Well, I also think that that is the tunnel vision too that therapists get when they treat OCD, not to throw some of them under the bus.
It's true.
But you can't have someone come in with POCD and just be like, oh, I have a set of standard, exposures that you're going to do, and then you're going to get better. That's right. People continue to get frustrated with therapy because not one person fits the mold of every single person with OCD.
We are not a mold. We are human beings, and psychological flexibility. I mean, those are, I use a lot of ACT within treatment. I use a lot of narrative therapy and experiential processing. And so strict ERP is wonderful, but it's not a mold that fits every single person. So I think a good exposure and response prevention therapist is also inclusive of those. Not that any of you aren't bad or are bad out there, but being able to mold with your client and creative treatment planning and very customized treatment planning. It's difficult.
Yeah.
But you're going into the mind of the individual and helping with how it's presenting in their lives.
Can I add to that too, Lori? Very much in line with what you're saying with agility. I think is there's a little bit of shock factor. I mean, we certainly don't learn this in graduate school. And some of the topics, you know, and in building my practice, my team, there is discussion around we can, and this is true of any therapy modality, but certainly with exposure and response prevention, you can only go as, your client can only heal as much as you're willing to go. So some of the topics that we talk about in OCD are nothing of what we're prepared for in school. So,
Right.
you know, I hold very seriously and with a lot of kindness in my heart that we are to do no harm to our clients. Harm to our clients who are struggling with OCD, a particular subtype, if we make a reaction like, ooh, or like, oh
Right.
my gosh, you know, that is actually doing harm. So I think to your point, to your question, Chrissie, there's also, you know, not a lot of therapists have the bandwidth to really go to some of those topics and do it from a clinical and compassionate standpoint that this is your symptom set that you're dealing with. Let's go through that together. I am not forming judgment. I'm here to help. And you can't do that also if you're from a place of rigid, like, this is my game plan, this is my manual, because each individual is an individual. They're going to show up with different needs.
And I think that's the perspective that we're training therapists on in working in the facet of OCD, even if they don't choose to get full on exposure and response prevention train, that they at least have one tool that can help them say, I'm not the right therapist for you.
Yes,
And
100%.
Exactly. Like Carla and I both come from abundance. I mean, she used to work for me and now she has her own private practice. And now we're back together again in a different facet. It's like that there's somebody out there who can help. And it's okay as a clinician to say, I don't think I can do this.
To drop the ego.
Exactly. I don't think that I can sit and tolerate, POCD. That's okay. That's okay.
Right.
And to be able to say, you know what, I think that you have OCD, or I think that my expansion of what I thought OCD was is no longer true. And I need either some more training or I need to know who my referrals are in the community. That's fine.
Yep.
That is totally fine. Because I will never be a psychodynamic therapist. And somebody needs that person. I don't have to be the end all be all. And that is, I think, Chrissie, that is about ego.
It is.
Or insecurity sometimes. And we have to be vulnerable and admit that exists.
You know, Lori, also what I have heard from clinicians coming in with curiosity right now, seeing some of these OCD symptoms coming forward in their clientele is, it could be, you know, an ego thing or insecurity, but I'm also seeing, clinicians that have built relationships with this client, and they're like, gosh, I feel badly. I mean, or I feel badly that I need to potentially refer out. I don't feel like I have the bandwidth or, ability right now to become an ERP specialist. And what do I do with that? Because we have a relationship, this client and I, we have a therapeutic alliance. And so some of those conversations that have come up in consultation is same thing there, Lori, like, that's okay. And let's talk creatively about how you might do that warm handoff, how you might keep that therapeutic alliance online. I've even had colleagues that will get release of information from client and have me come in, now it's virtual, but come into a session and talk. And there can be so much more of that supportive care team around the person that doesn't feel like, well, I don't know what I'm doing here, so I'm going to pass you off to an ERP specialist. So I'm seeing kind of those three things going on as far as clinicians kind of reaching their limit for their skill set and what do they do to do that handoff.
Well, the same as it goes for because I specialize in supporting people, you know, on the opposite end of what you do. The same goes for clients. They don't want to leave their therapist that they formed this amazing bond with, even though they know that the therapist isn't doing good, you know, and they don't want to hurt the therapist's feelings, you know, but they know that they're not getting help, or the therapist is like, oh, the therapist will say something like, well, you know, I'll support you if you want to come up with your hierarchy. And I'm like, oh my God, like, no, leave now. But it's hard, especially with OCD, when, you know, people get very wrapped up and I don't want to hurt someone's feelings. And I don't want, you know, so, you know, peer support does help people, I think, in that kind of empowering the person to be able to make the choice, you know, then what's going to benefit their own recovery. But and Gamechangers also, if you want to inquire through Gamechangers, we've also come up with a letter that you can write, or a template of a letter that you can write and send to your therapist. It's very, very nice. It's very not mean at all or pointed, but just basically saying, you know, I'm working with a therapist now that does treat OCD correctly. Here are some resources if you want to get trained, and thank you for the work you did. But, you know, I needed to refer out to another client. So if you need that, just email us and we can send you that template.
That's wonderful.
Change it in any way that you want. But it's helpful. And I always encourage people, if your therapist is not using techniques like exposure response prevention, ACT with ERP, if they're not using that, please go back and let them know later, because you could save someone else's life who comes through with POCD or sexual orientation OCD, you know, or OCD, or any of the ones that are just kind of very much overlooked. And a therapist will go, oh my gosh, I got that letter. I've seen this before. I'll refer out to these resources this person provided. You could really save someone's life.
Oh, that's a wonderful resource.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And even sharing like, hey, I heard about this training and I was listening to OCD Gamechangers. Like, it's okay to do that. It's not crossing a boundary. And, you know, just advocating for yourself. And that's what really, you know, Modern Therapist Training Collective is trying to do, is fill a gap in the community. And one of the questions that we've gotten is like, you know, what's different than the New England OCD Training Center, University of Pennsylvania, or UPenn, and the BTTI is, you know, we're kind of like grassroots and coming from this perspective of filling a need in our communities with very little providers. And all of those states have gigantic institutions and wonderful resources, and we don't have that here. So we're filling the gaps with some diversity components, really speaking to the client experience, really utilizing Carla's expertise in EMDR and helping those clinicians that want to use that modality by getting trained in this other modality. If you want to treat OCD, you need to understand everything, not just the EMDR lens. So filling those gaps, and also we're, you know, we have some people from New Mexico and rural parts of Colorado, just trying to reach that, making it very simple, and addressing all clinicians on a continuum from assessment to full on training in exposure and response prevention. So
this is so needed.
Have to be like all on board, like, I want to be trained in ERP. You can come. We're actually having a live training on May 1st from 9 to 11. Really honing in on that. Year 2 of the pandemic, how you need to know to assess what OCD really looks like outside of the confines of the DSM criteria or our normal mental, oh, you must have compulsions to do that. And if you don't have hand washing, you probably don't have OCD. Or maybe
Yeah.
you're faking it, or that is an OCD. Just really dispelling a lot of the misconceptions.
I just had an idea, so remind me when we're done. But I had to say it now or I would forget. But I have an idea, so remind me then. But I also wanted to say, everybody's like, what's your idea? I'm sorry, y'all.
Everybody
I'm not
wants
going to
to
tell
know.
you, but I'm going to tell them. The incredible and amazing thing, and then I want you to, because we're getting to time anyway, but I want you to be able to tell everybody where they can find you and more information. One of the things we just did, we've been doing focus groups for therapists through OCD Gamechangers, which have been awesome. And we've got a lot of really cool things rolling out this year because of the awesome therapists that are dedicated to filling these gaps that our community faces, and we don't have enough people really putting their eyes and energy in that. And we're doing that through those focus groups. And one of the things are having a solid, accurate list of where therapists can go to get trained for OCD treatment. And so Lori's focus group came up with an accurate list, vetted list. It's amazing. My husband's not in the room right now, or I would ask him if it's up, but he's responsible for putting it up. And so if you're a therapist that is looking for that, OCD Gamechangers can provide those resources to you. So if you go on our website and you don't see it, I will nudge Sean later tonight. Reach
It'll
out
be
to
coming
us.
soon.
Yeah. Or reach out to us at ocdgamechangers@gmail.com. We are happy to forward that to you. We're working toward being the premier website where you can go for anything and everything and all those gaps that have not been filled. We're really excited about it. We've got a lot of really cool stuff. And Lori, your team and your focus group was responsible for that. So thank you.
Absolutely. And we've, included ourselves on that list. So you can find
of course.
us at moderntherapisttrainingcollective.com. And our handle on Instagram is at, let me check it because I don't want to say it wrong. And Chrissie laughs at me all the time. It's hilarious.
Therapist Collective, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So if you see them come across your Instagram.
Training Collective.
Oh, okay, good. It changed.
Therapist Training Collective.
Okay. It first came across and they started following me and it said Therapist Collective. And I read it as the Rapist Collective. And I was like, who are these people? And there was no picture, photo, or anything. And I'm like, this is a troll. And I blocked them.
That's funny. Yeah.
You still have us blocked.
I would change that after. Lori's like, I tried to follow you. And I was like, oh.
I blocked you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Those kind of people follow me.
That's too funny.
Yeah. So any final thoughts of where you want to go? What's your vision? What's your mission? And what if people want to get involved? Not only get trained, but as y'all grow and get bigger, tell us a little bit about, this will be kind of the wrap up, but what you're looking to do.
Mm-hmm. We started with supervision, which we're still going to be doing. We started with creating a book around supervision for supervisors who are training clinicians who are doing exposure and response prevention, because if you get a really good supervisor, but who is not trained in that, they're going to be like, you're doing what?
Yeah.
What are you doing meeting your clients in the community? What are you doing in their homes? Like, those aren't typical. This is very specific to ERPs. That's how we started.
Yeah.
And meeting at Panera.
Right. And from there, we realized that some of the work that we could be doing in the way of training colleagues in the community and bringing folks together on, like Lori said, all ends of the continuum, from I'm curious about this, I don't know how to do maybe a differential diagnosis from something else, all the way to those that are passionate like we are and wanting to get really skilled in ERP. But to do that supervision book or that resource, part of it included having some of these conversations. So to your question, Chrissie, it's including group consultation.
Mm-hmm.
So folks can drop in, get support, share a case, and Lori or I will be facilitating those at any one point in time. So they get to supervisory styles. That's always helpful too. So the consultation groups are really filling a need. We are cross-sharing between our 2 group practices, supervision of our clinicians. So that's kind of that other level of supervision, and all of that. Those are rich data points for including some additional complexity and case studies that will be part of that supervisory book. So that, if someone, say, in our one of our rural communities here or in an adjacent state is not able to, say, come to a training, they can start with that book, or they can start by joining in on a consultation group.
So we're trying to do kind of a top-down processing,
Yeah.
because supervisors are the gatekeepers for our community.
Mm-hmm.
And supervisors train other supervisors. So we're hoping to kind of, like, from the clinical stance, keep spreading this word around the misconceptions of OCD, even amongst therapists, because we know that it exists, right?
Mm-hmm.
Game changers, we know that. We hear it all the time as clinicians in our practices. So really kind of expanding that reach, not just to the people who are suffering, because they know how much they're suffering,
Mm-hmm.
but to the clinicians who are kind of blinded by their protocol, their modality, or just the awareness and how they were trained and how that's changed over time.
Excellent. Well, this is really game changing. I mean, it really, and if you're watching and you're thinking, well, whatever, there's a lot of places out there that train. No, this is not. I mean, they do, but they don't do it like this, and there's not enough. So we need this kind of just a deep dive into what people really need to become effective therapists to treat OCD. So that's why it's game changing, and that's why you're part of our family.
Thank you for
So,
welcoming us.
Look, I just put up our logo. There it is. Yay. I forgot. It always blocks out Patrick McGrath's head whenever we do the addiction talk. So that's why I always I take it off. Anyway, well, thank you so much for being here. Thank you for what you're doing. This is so needed in our community. It's so needed, I feel like, just to advance therapists a little bit more and how they can relate to us, those of us with lived experience. And yeah, I so much appreciate you and can't wait to see where it goes.
Mm-hmm.
It's growing. So May 1st is our next live training, and we have a lot of on-demand trainings thus far that can be, you can train from your own home. So we're delighted to bring this. We're also open, very open for feedback, and we'll be collecting some data points from, some of our participants in that to continue to fill those gaps. So thank you to all of our clients who have really, provided some feedback about their experience in community, their experience with other therapists. That way we could fill these gaps and just continue helping.
Excellent. Well, Carla and Laura, thank you so much for your dedication to this community and just continuing to think outside the box for us, because it's people like you that really are filling the gaps that need to be filled. So you are game changers.
Thank you.
And Monday Mavericks. All right. To all those who are listening, I hope you enjoyed this. This was very enlightening and very awesome. And just appreciate you and your continued support for OCD Game Changers. Remember, we are a 501c3. We do take donations, and we are powered by your donations. So OCDGamechangers.com, you can donate there, and by clicking the button. You also can come to our event, which all of the proceeds from the event go directly to our initiatives as well. OCDGamechangers.com, go to the events tab, you'll find it. I hope to see you there because it is going to be fun as shit.
I can't wait.
So we will see you soon. I'm not really sure what's on the calendar. I should have looked first, but I'm sure it's going to be a fireside or a Maverick. Either way, I will see you for the addiction talk in a couple weeks. Stay tuned for my social media on Instagram at Pure O Chrissie, Treatment for OCD Consulting on Facebook, or OCD Gamechangers on Instagram or Facebook. Just check us out and pay attention. We'll be listing when the next OCD and addiction compassionate connections will be. It's going to be about 2 weeks, and we'll see you then. Thank you all, and thank y'all for being here. We'll see y'all soon.